Before he made millions laugh, Jim Carrey cried himself to sleep in a van. From rejection, poverty, and pain, to global fame and fortune, his journey is one of unimaginable resilience. This is the unbelievable story of Jim Carrey, only on Legends Unfold. Before the lights, before the fame, before he made the world laugh, Jim Carrey was just a boy trying to survive. Born in Newmarket, Ontario, Canada, on January 17, 1962, Jim was the youngest of 4 kids in a struggling working-class family. His father, Percy, once a saxophonist chasing his own dreams, gave up music and became an accountant to support the family. His mother, Kathleen, battled illness and depression. From the outside, they looked like an ordinary family, but behind closed doors, life was anything but easy. Even as a child, Jim showed something special. He had this wild energy, making faces, doing impressions, turning pain into laughter. At school, he became the class clown. But the laughter wasn't just for fun, it was his shield. It was how he coped with everything falling apart at home. Then, when Jim was just 12, the unthinkable happened. His dad lost his job. Overnight, the Carreys went from barely making it to not making it at all. Bills stopped being paid. The house was lost. And the family of 6 ended up living in a van. Not a tour bus. Not an RV. A regular Volkswagen camper van, parked near a factory where Jim and his brother would soon work. That van wasn't an adventure. It was their home. No privacy. No comfort. Just 4 wheels and a growing sense of despair. By age 15, Jim had to drop out of school. He started working 8-hour night shifts as a janitor in that very factory. Cleaning toilets, mopping floors, emptying trash. Every night, while other teenagers hung out or went to school dances, Jim scrubbed industrial hallways in silence. And every morning after work, he'd climb back into that van, exhausted, hoping he could sleep through the hunger. But even then, even in the lowest moments, Jim was dreaming. He would stand in front of a mirror, making faces, doing voices, practicing characters. Late at night, when no one was watching, he turned sadness into stories, pain into punchlines. That van became his stage. And his imagination became his escape. What most people didn't know was that Jim was training. Not in any acting school, but in life. In struggle. In silence. And he wasn't doing it alone. Through it all, his father, Percy, never stopped believing in him. Even though Percy had set aside his own dreams, he made sure Jim didn't give up on his. He would drive Jim to comedy clubs in downtown Toronto, even when they barely had gas in the tank, just to give his son a shot. Jim got on stage for the first time at 15. It was at Yuck Yucks, a local club that gave rookies a mic and 5 minutes. The crowd stared. His jokes didn't land. He was awkward, nervous, and then he got booed off stage. Most people would quit right there, but not Jim. He went home. He worked harder. He kept writing, kept trying, kept bombing, and kept learning. Each night, he studied the great comedians, not just what they said, but how they said it. The rhythm, the pauses, the faces. And slowly, people started to laugh. Jim wasn't just funny, he was different. Unpredictable. Full of emotion. And deep down, even at 17, he knew he didn't belong in a factory. He belonged in front of the world. So he did something bold, something most people would call crazy. On a hill in Los Angeles, looking out over the lights of Hollywood, Jim Carrey took out a blank check and wrote himself a check for $10 million, dated it 1995, and added the words, "For acting services rendered." At the time, he had no job, no agent, no credits. Just belief. He folded that check and put it in his wallet, not as a fantasy, but as a promise. Because Jim wasn't chasing fame for fame's sake. He was chasing freedom. Freedom from poverty. From fear. From feeling invisible. He wasn't just dreaming big. He was preparing for the world to catch up. He believed that one day, somehow, the world would know his name. And he was right. By the time Jim Carrey turned 17, he had made a decision that most people wouldn't dare to dream. He was going to take on Hollywood. No backup plan. No safety net. Just a suitcase, a few dollars, and a fire inside that wouldn't go out. With his father's old car and his dreams packed tight, Jim left behind the streets of Toronto and crossed into the United States. He landed in Los Angeles, the city where stars are made, and just as often, broken. At first, everything felt magical. Palm trees, bright skies, movie billboards. It looked like the life he had always imagined. But very quickly, reality hit hard. Doors didn't open. Phones didn't ring. And no one, absolutely no one, was interested in a skinny Canadian kid with a goofy grin and rubbery facial expressions. He tried to get into comedy clubs and was turned away. He begged for auditions and was ignored. One casting agent even told him his act was too weird and that he'd never be taken seriously in Hollywood. Imagine working your whole life, suffering in silence, holding on to a dream through years of poverty, only to be told you're a joke. But Jim Carrey didn't quit. He scraped together whatever he could, sleeping on friends' couches, eating cheap meals, taking small gigs just to survive. And every night, he performed in small clubs. Sometimes in front of 20 people. Sometimes just 2. He bombed. A lot. Audiences didn't always get his wild, over-the-top style. He moved too much. He made too many faces. He didn't fit the mold. But what people didn't realize was that Jim wasn't trying to fit in. He was building something different. Something no one had ever seen before. Still, the rejection cut deep. Night after night, after being booed or ignored, Jim would go back to his tiny apartment, stare at the ceiling and wonder, am I kidding myself? The doubts were real. The loneliness was suffocating. The fear crept in constantly. But in those darkest moments, something inside him kept whispering, keep going. Just one more try. And so he did. He kept performing, kept tweaking his act, kept refining his impressions and building new characters, not for fame, but because he couldn't not do it. It was in his blood, in his soul. During the day, he worked odd jobs, construction, landscaping, anything that paid. At night, he became someone else entirely, a man with no limits on stage, bending reality with his face and voice. One evening, after years of struggle, he caught the attention of a legendary comic, Rodney Dangerfield. Rodney saw something raw in Jim, something wild, something uncontainable. And instead of brushing him off, Rodney took Jim under his wing. He invited Jim to open for him on tour. That small gesture changed everything. Suddenly, Jim had access to bigger crowds. More attention. He was still weird. Still different. But now, the laughter was growing louder. And people were beginning to notice. But even with that small spark of hope, the real breakthrough was still years away. Jim knew he needed more than just funny impressions. He needed to evolve. He studied acting like a scientist. He read scripts. He dissected performances. He watched movies, not just to be entertained, but to learn how the greats controlled emotion. He even started writing his own material, screenplays, characters, comedy sets. He wanted to be ready when the opportunity came. And then, something strange happened. He could see it. He could taste it. And now, after all the rejection, all the humiliation, and all the doubt, the industry was finally catching on. But just before his big break came, the world tested him again. Jim's beloved father, Percy, the man who had believed in him when no one else did, passed away. Jim was devastated. He lost the man who had been his rock, his best friend, his biggest supporter. At the funeral, Jim quietly slipped something into his father's pocket, that same $10 million check. He placed it there, folded, soft with age, worn at the corners. Because even though Percy didn't live to see it happen, Jim knew it was coming, and he wanted his father to carry that dream with him. Soon after, Jim got his first real taste of success on the sketch comedy show In Living Color. His characters were wild, unpredictable, outrageous. Audiences loved him. Hollywood couldn't look away. And in that moment, everything he had endured suddenly made sense. The rejection, the tears, the years of sleeping in a van, being called a failure, being told he'd never make it. It had all led to this. Jim Carrey was no longer the weirdo in the back of the club. He was the next big thing. And he was just getting started. 4 years, Jim Carrey lived in the shadows, a struggling comic, hustling in clubs, auditioning for roles he never got, hearing no more times than anyone should. But everything changed in the early 1990s, when the world finally caught up to the genius that had been waiting in the wings. His first real break came with the sketch comedy series, In Living Color. It was bold, edgy, and diverse, and it gave Jim exactly what he needed: a platform to be unapologetically himself. Week after week, Jim stole the show with his outrageous characters, from the wild-eyed fire Marshal Bill to bizarre impressions that left audiences in stitches. He didn't just act in sketches, he exploded on screen. People didn't know what they were watching, but they loved it. And for the first time, Hollywood started to pay attention. This wasn't just another comedian. This was something new. Something wild. Something they couldn't ignore anymore. Then came 1994, the year that changed everything. In a single year, Jim Carrey went from a rising comic to the most bankable comedy star in the world. It started with a film no one expected to succeed. Clapperboard Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. It was loud. It was bizarre. It was Jim Carrey. He played a strange, over-the-top pet detective with crazy hair, weird voices, and the kind of physical comedy no one had seen in decades. Critics were confused. Studios were nervous. But audiences? They loved it. Ace Ventura became a surprise box office hit, making over $100 million worldwide, on a tiny budget. Suddenly, Jim Carrey was everywhere. He wasn't just funny, he was a force of nature. Just months later, he followed up with another smash hit, Clapperboard The Mask. Now, he wasn't just a funny guy, he was a full-blown movie star. With CGI effects, green makeup, and a performance that was half cartoon, half genius, Jim became iconic. The film grossed over $350 million globally. Kids imitated his dance. Adults quoted his lines. Jim was unstoppable. And then, to top it all off, came the holiday release, Clapperboard Dumb and Dumber. Starring alongside Jeff Daniels, Jim played Lloyd Christmas, a clueless but lovable loser on a road trip full of ridiculousness. Once again, audiences flocked to theaters. The film made $250 million, and Carrey's paycheck for that one movie? $10 million. The exact amount on that imaginary check he had written to himself years ago. The check he carried in his wallet when he was broke, when he was nobody. That was now real. Within a single year, Jim Carrey had gone from opening act in nightclubs to the highest-paid comedic actor in Hollywood. But it wasn't just the money. It was the validation. The proof that his weirdness wasn't a weakness. It was a superpower. People didn't want him to change. They wanted more of him. More energy. More chaos. More Jim. And the roles kept coming. He starred in hit after hit. Batman Forever as the Riddler. Liar Liar, where he played a fast-talking lawyer who literally couldn't lie. The Cable Guy, a darker role that showed he could do more than just comedy. With each role he pushed boundaries. He made people laugh and made them uncomfortable. Because Carrey didn't just perform, he transformed. His face, his body, his voice, everything became part of the act. He didn't just play characters. He became them. Directors called him unpredictable. Co-stars called him a genius. Audiences couldn't get enough. But deep down, Jim never forgot where he came from. He wasn't raised in mansions. He didn't grow up in luxury. He was the kid who once lived in a van, the janitor who dreamed in the mirror. And now, that dream had come true in ways he couldn't have even imagined. Still, he didn't let success stop him from growing. Jim wanted to challenge himself, to go beyond comedy, to prove he had depth. He wasn't satisfied just being funny. He wanted to be respected. So he began to take on more serious roles, darker roles, dramatic turns that would show the world another side of Jim Carrey. A side that wasn't just about laughter. But before we go there, we have to understand this moment. 1994 was the year Jim Carrey stopped knocking on the door and kicked it wide open. He didn't just enter Hollywood. He took it over. With unmatched physicality, raw emotion, and a style that no one could copy, Jim proved something powerful. That you don't have to fit the mold to succeed. That the world will try to laugh at you until you give them a reason to laugh with you. and that sometimes, the most unlikely person becomes the biggest star. Jim Carrey had made it. But what came next would reveal the real man behind the mask. At the height of his fame, Jim Carrey had it all. Money, fame, awards, millions of fans. He was the face of comedy, the king of the box office, the man who could make the world laugh with just one raised eyebrow. But behind the laughter was a man who was deeply hurting. You see, people thought they knew Jim Carrey. They knew the rubber-faced goofball, the whirlwind of energy, the star who lit up every screen. But few people really understood him, because when the cameras stopped rolling, the silence was deafening. In interviews, Jim often joked. He made people laugh so they wouldn't see what was beneath the surface. But inside, he was battling something invisible, something far more serious than any on-screen villain. Depression. Not sadness. Not just a bad day. But a lingering, relentless fog that followed him everywhere, even into success. In one candid interview, Jim said, "I was never depressed because of fame. I was depressed because I was pretending to be someone I wasn't. Because after a while, being the funny guy became a prison. People expected him to always be on. To always deliver. To always smile. But no one saw the moments when Jim was alone, in his mansion, on top of the world, yet feeling like he was nothing. He had the fame he dreamed of, but it didn't fill the void. The childhood pain. The pressure. The trauma. It didn't go away when he signed million-dollar contracts. It didn't vanish when he walked red carpets. In fact, in many ways, it got worse. As Jim once said, "I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that it's not the answer." By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Jim began to retreat from the public eye. He started speaking differently too. Not like a celebrity, but like a man who had been through something real. He told fans not to chase fame, but to chase truth. Not to seek validation, but to seek self-awareness. In a viral commencement speech, he told graduating students, "You can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance on doing what you love." He wasn't preaching. He was sharing his scars. Because by now, Jim Carrey understood something most people don't learn until it's too late. That the world will always try to define you. But peace only comes when you define yourself. He wasn't just evolving as an actor, he was evolving as a human being. And during this time, he also experienced tremendous personal loss. One of the most painful moments came with the tragic passing of his ex-girlfriend, Catriona White, in 2015. Jim was devastated. The media storm that followed was cruel, invasive, and deeply personal. But even through the heartbreak, he didn't lash out. He withdrew. He healed in silence. And when he did speak again, his voice was softer, wiser, more grounded. Jim's message was no longer about being funny, it was about being free. Free from ego. Free from expectations. Free from the mask he had worn for so long. Because in the end, Jim Carrey realized that who he really was wasn't the characters. It wasn't Ace Ventura. It wasn't the mask. It wasn't the Riddler. It was the man behind all of it. The artist. The thinker. The soul on a journey. And slowly, the world began to see that side too. In dramatic films like The Truman Show, Man on the Moon, and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Jim showed us depth, vulnerability, and heartbreak. He didn't just make us laugh anymore. He made us feel. Because the truth is, the funniest people often carry the deepest pain. And Jim Carrey was living proof of that. But he didn't let the pain destroy him. He used it, transformed it, turned it into art, philosophy, and purpose. He proved that true success isn't found on the screen. It's found within. And in doing so, he became more than just a movie star. He became a voice for the broken, the lost, the misunderstood. Jim Carrey reminded us all that behind every smile, there's a story. And behind every joke, there's a truth worth hearing. They say true legends leave behind more than just movies. They leave behind meaning. And by the time Jim Carrey stepped back from the spotlight, he had done far more than entertain the world. He had changed it. Jim Carrey's legacy isn't just built on box office numbers or golden statues. It's built on something deeper. It's built on the courage to be himself, no matter the cost. He could have stayed in the safe lane. He could have kept cashing in on comedies, playing the same loud, silly characters over and over. But he chose growth. He chose honesty. He chose to walk away from the noise and ask, who am I really without the camera? That question led him to a new chapter in his life, one not defined by scripts or studios, but by stillness and self-discovery. He began creating art, vivid, sometimes chaotic paintings that expressed his inner world. He wrote. He meditated. He reconnected with nature, with peace, and with the present moment. And the world began to see a different side of Jim, not as a character, not as a punchline, but as a philosopher in disguise. He spoke about the ego, about detachment, about letting go of identity. He wasn't trying to impress anymore. He was trying to wake people up. In interviews, he said things most actors would never say. I used to think I was just a guy who made funny faces. But now, I see myself as a wave in the ocean, part of something much larger. Jim Carrey stopped being a performer and started being a mirror, reflecting the deeper questions we all try to avoid. And while he stepped away from mainstream Hollywood, he never completely disappeared. In 2017, he returned with a chilling, layered performance as Andy Kaufman in the Netflix documentary Jim and Andy, The Great Beyond. The film revealed how deeply Jim immerses himself in his roles, to the point where the line between character and self completely disappears. It wasn't just acting. It was transformation. It was spiritual. And a little unsettling. That's the thing about Jim Carrey. He's never been easy to define. Just when the world thinks they have him figured out, he evolves again. In more recent years, he played the villain Dr. Robotnik in Sonic the Hedgehog, bringing back a taste of his signature madness, but this time with a knowing wink. A man who's been to the top, fallen to the bottom, and come back with perspective. Jim Carrey's story isn't just about success. It's about survival. He survived poverty. He survived rejection. He survived fame. And he survived the most dangerous illusion of all, the idea that your worth is defined by applause. Jim proved that it's okay to be weird, to be emotional, to fall apart and build yourself back up again. He showed us that the path to greatness is never straight, that sometimes the road is dark, lonely, painful. But if you keep moving forward, if you believe in yourself even when no one else does, the world will catch up. And when it does, it'll see what you always knew was inside. Jim Carrey was never just a funny guy. He was and is a visionary, an artist of the soul, a messenger of joy and truth. He turned his pain into power, his trauma into talent, his chaos into something beautiful. And perhaps his greatest gift wasn't a role or a punchline, but a message. That you don't have to be perfect to matter. You just have to be real. And maybe that's the most inspiring part of all. Because Jim Carrey didn't just make us laugh. He made us look inside ourselves. He reminded us that you can lose everything and still win at life. So the next time you see a clip of Ace Ventura talking to animals, or Lloyd Christmas riding a scooter to Aspen, or the Mask dancing in a zoot suit, remember the man behind the madness. The kid who once lived in a van. The dreamer who wrote himself a check. The soul who found peace, not in fame, but in letting go. That is the true legacy of Jim Carrey. If this story moved you, inspired you, or helped you see life a little differently, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and hit subscribe for more stories like this. This is Legends Unfold, where we go beyond the fame to find the truth. And this was the story of Jim Carrey.
It's Visionary Steps 09. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Subscribe us for such as interesting videos. Thank you so much.